All right, welcome back to the channel. Man, it was a really good interview conducted by Brian Custer on his new podcast. It's on a YouTube channel, so go check that out. About Errol Spence Jr. And Errol Spence Jr. described his comeback from his car accident and really provided some details that make what happened to him sound all the more amazing. And we're looking forward to seeing him come back. Let's talk about what Errol Spence Jr. and Brian Custer talked about in that interview in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. All right, Brian Custer, who in my understanding is a Noop. I'm a member of a fraternity in college. The nickname for it is called the Noops. I'm not going to tell you what the name of the fraternity is, but my understanding is that Brian Custer is also there. So, hey man, I have a tendency to like Brian Custer. Also, I think Brian Custer is very professional. He's very professional, very thorough guy. Really like the work that he did in this interview with Errol Spence Jr. In fact, the interview with Errol Spence Jr. was so good that it made me think, dog, that's why I don't do that's why I don't do interviews, man, because there really are people that are very skilled at that, and Brian Custer is one of them. So in this conversation, though, he talked and asked Errol Spence Jr. some questions that were very tough questions, something that you wouldn't typically expect to hear out of boxing media. But he did it in a way where he didn't come off impolite. He didn't come off rude. I just thought it was an excellent job and really enlightened me into what happened. Now, let me give you a little background on to prepare you for what they talked about. But before I do that, let me say special thank you to everybody for continuing to watch this channel. I know that there's not a lot of live boxing going on, but I am a boxing addict. Love everything about the sport, the politics, the actual fights, the drama that goes on around it. Love the whole thing. So for me, it's been very easy to continue to do videos and talk about boxing, but I understand that there's other people that, got more. There's other things in the world going on that might take people's attention. So the fact that you take this time and spend it with me to talk about boxing or listen to what I have to say about boxing and comment in the comment section is greatly appreciated. So thank you. Thank you to everybody that supports in the live streams, that supports through the Patreon. We've got a new Patreon video up today, up for the Patreons. You'll definitely want to go check that out. I'm in full rant mode. It's definitely unfiltered for non-international boxing in that one. So go check that out. So thank you. But let's talk about this. If you recall, I think it was back in October of 2019, where I woke up, went to my desk, that I'm not the desk that I'm sitting in front of now. I bought a new desk since then, but came down, sit at my desk, going to look at the new boxing news for the day, like I do every morning, like clockwork, right around 6 a.m. in the morning, sometimes 5:30 in the morning, but that's what I do it. And so I'm going through it, and then I see Errol Spence Jr. in car accident. And I'm like, wow, because if you guys aren't familiar, I've actually interviewed Errol on this channel before. I consider myself to be friends with some of his family members, right? On a friendly level, not like, personal inside contact information, but on a friendly level. Got a lot of respect for his family members. Father in particular is one of the nicest guys that I've met. Tremendous guy. So I have a big attachment to, and I do not deny this. For Deontay Wilder, what Deontay Wilder has gone through as far as, and there'll be another video up about that today, through his career and the treatment he's received in his career and the way that he handles himself as a man, as a sportsman and as a man, I appreciate him a lot. Same thing for Errol Spence Jr. I have a lot of appreciation for him, and I find myself to be a fan and root for him. Where other fighters, I can really appreciate what they're doing, but if they lose, hey man, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. But Deontay Wilder and Errol Spence Jr., I really have a lot of appreciation for. So when I hear that he had this car accident, I was just, is he going to come back? Is he going to be, first of all, is he going to live? Number two, and then after that, because when I saw that he had the accident, I just left my mind that he was ever going to fight again. Like, just to be honest, I was like, oh man, his career is over. Because in any other scenario, dude, it's almost impossible to imagine that he wouldn't have been. However, he did. And I think this interview sheds light onto how he survived that accident, and it also sheds light on his new approach, or his renewed approach to the sport of boxing. So, as far as talking about the accident, he said that he was found 80 feet away from his car, from the car. So he got thrown clear of the car a long distance, landed right before all the tumbling happened, and then landed. I can't imagine how high you'd have to go to be thrown. I think they said he was thrown 80 feet, right? So if you're thrown 80 feet, how hard you have to hit the ground or how you have to go to land that far. I have to believe that you were tossed a good way up in the air, came and then landed flat down, but he survived. So so he verified that the one thing that probably saved his life was not wearing a seatbelt, which it could open up all kind of different conversations about, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. When it ain't your time to go, it ain't your time to go. Now, I wouldn't advise people to go riding around in Ferraris without seatbelts, but hey, he was very, very fortunate in that particular situation. But also being thrown 80 feet and landing, that tells you he was also very fortunate that he was a professional athlete. Now, that's not the first time that I've heard of something like that happening. I have a good friend of mine, actually, it's a guy who was a professional baseball. He was a professional baseball player, played Major League Baseball, and he was on a vacation, and he was on one of them ski-doos. And the ski-doo, or the motor boats, I think they call them ski-doo, basically like the motorcycle, look like motorcycles that you're riding on the water. His blew up while he was on it, and he flew in the air. Now, I'm not quite sure how he wound up flying out, but landing on the ground. I think maybe what happened was he was, it was docked or whatever, and he started up and it blew up, and he flew right and landed on his back. Anybody else, the doctor said if he had not been so muscular and so strong and had enough muscle and strength to absorb that shock, that his back would have been broke, he would have been gone, right? So the fact that Errol Spence Jr. is an athlete who had trained his body to take contact, to take, not that type of contact, but it was trained to absorb punishment. I think that has a lot to do with the fact why he lived and got through that, or why when he came down, and he said that the doctor told him he didn't have any broken bones. He just had a lot of severe bruising. So then he talked about Brian Custer asked him, what he remembered of it, what the accident was like. He said, man, I don't remember any of that. The only thing that mattered, he said, matter of fact, he doesn't remember most of the stuff about being in the hospital. He really remembers when he left the hospital and they got him off of all the drugs that he was on to keep him from feeling the pain. And then a few days later, he's like, man, all that pain came back. And I was like, send me back to the hospital, right? This hurts. So then he was asked, how long was it before you really thought that, you could really come back to boxing? And he said it was about, he suffered with the effects of it for about 3 months. And then at that point in time, he was able to, get back and train and test his body and all that stuff. Another thing that was really good about it is that he looked not only did he looked better. Like, if you look at what he looks like in that video, you can tell that he doesn't have all that weight in his face. He has a beard, and even with the beard, his face doesn't look as puffy or doesn't look as big as it has looked, during times leading up into other fights, right? So I think that all in all, man, this thing is going to wind up being, for him, a blessing. And it was also really nice to hear him you know, he talked about fighters, young fighters coming up. And he's like, man, it's really important for me to train and get out there and really get the dog, get the dog back in. I'm paraphrasing, right? Because now you have all these other fighters who haven't been able to fight, that aren't in, strong financial position. So when boxing does come back, they're going to be even more hungry, and, and trying to get, trying to get a piece of that, trying to get their hands on some of that boxing money. So it was a really good interview. I won't go into everything that he said, but I thought that was very enlightening, because I had not heard out of his mouth, what had happened. I'd heard, him saying that he was rededicating himself to training, right? He also said that he always works hard in training, but, during the times that he was laying off, right, that because once he became a champion, you're not fighting as often, right? There's 6 and 7 months in which you're not fighting. So he said he lacked a lot of the discipline. He lacked a lot of discipline during his downtime. But now he understands, like, why Floyd Mayweather Jr. was a great fighter, and why other guys were great fighters that were really just consistently on their game, 24/7, 365 days a year, no matter what. And they make their training, they create habits for themselves outside of training that make it that much easy when you get into training camp. So it was just a really good interview. I highly recommend you guys go check out Brian Custer's podcast. Forgive me for not remembering the name on it. All you got to do is put Brian Custer, Errol Spence Jr., put that in the YouTube search terms, and it'll come up. And actually, I might put a link in the description box below if I can remember it. I get kind of, lazy with that sometimes. But anyway, it is what it is. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.